Welcome to the No Filter Weekly for episode number 12. It's not quite a baker's dozen, that will be next week, but as with me as always is my colleague, friend, and accomplice, Shay and I imagine
Yes.
you're doing well, given that your team, the Richmond Tigers, lifted their
Oh
third
man.
Premiership Cup in 4 years recently over the
Yeah,
weekend.
man. It was a pretty exciting weekend. Like before the last 4 years, they've been a pretty shit team. There've been some pretty lean years. We finished ninth a lot, rarely made the finals, and then something that just switched in 2017. And yeah, it's been a pretty crazy 4 years. It's weird, right? I've never barracked for a team where
They've won.
even though they've won firstly, but they continue to win. But I think the more important thing is, when you barrack for a team and like they might be down, but
Yeah.
you just know they'll win. Like
Yeah.
I've never really got to that point, and now I feel this with this team because like they'll be down by like 20, 30 points, and I'm not worried. I'm like, yeah, they'll come back in the second half, and they always do. So it's awesome, man. It's awesome going for a team that's kind of creating a bit of a dynasty now as well.
Yeah, I used to feel that way about Manchester United back in the 90s and the noughties, where they had this thing for coming back and scoring late goals, like always
Yeah.
92nd minute. If they were down a goal and needed that goal to progress to the next round of the Champions League or whatever it was, oftentimes you'd have this faith that they would do it because they'd done it so many times. And then there was that classic Champions League final in '99 against Bayern Munich, where Teddy Sheringham and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer scored two goals like after the 90th minute to win the Champions League, right? So that was
Pretty
something
nuts.
that they did all the time. But
Yeah.
so I do know what it's like to barrack for a team that wins all the time, although I haven't felt that for a number of years now. So
Yeah, well, like I said, I've been barracking for Richmond for like God knows how many years, but it was like a lot of lean years. So it's kind of like making up for that now. But it's one of the craziest things is, so their CEO of Richmond in 2000 and I think it was 2009 or 2010, he put together like a 10-year plan. And he was like, all right, in 10 years time, by 2020, we're going to win 3 premierships. We're going to have over 75,000 fans, members,
yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. And everyone laughed at him, right? Everyone's like, you guys suck. Like, you're not going to even win 1 premiership. And now 2020, they've won 3 flags. They've got over 100,000 members. It's just crazy the fact he came up with that, and they've actually met all those.
So what was it about the plan or the execution of the plan that differentiated Richmond from the other 15 clubs?
I think I was listening to I think it was a podcast or an interview that he was doing, and he was saying how in previous years there was a lot of disconnect between players, staff, management. Everyone wasn't on the same page, and I think the biggest thing they kind of brought in, especially early, 2017, they brought in was around that connection piece across players as well, like just connecting better with teammates and kind of playing for each other and that kind of stuff. So that was a big thing in 2017. But I guess in the lead up to that, they tried to get, management, board, players, coaches all on the same page in the early 2010 onwards. So that like 2010 to 2015, and they made a couple of finals and they started to build momentum. But I think the biggest piece for them was just that connection thing, which they talk about a lot. And there's actually a book written in 2017. This reporter or journalist pretty much followed the team for a year. This was without knowing they were going to win the premiership that year. Literally followed them around for a year and wrote a book about it at the end of the year. And that was the year they won their first premiership in like 37 years. And a lot of it was around just players being vulnerable around each other, connecting better with each other, and then kind of performing better on the field as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, when you talk about getting everyone on the same page, it's basically values alignment. So they all believe in the same thing. They believe in the mission, and they're all working towards the same objective. Kind of reminds me of, and what you've talked about there about vulnerability as well, reminds me of Ubuntu, which was the core philosophy at the Boston Celtics when Doc Rivers was coaching them, and they had Garnett and was it Ray Allen and Pierce,
Pierce, yeah.
And they ended up going on to win their first championship in like 20 years or something to that effect, I think it was. But this Ubuntu, because they had so many stars in the team, they were at risk of falling victim to egos. But Ubuntu was all about playing for the team, as opposed to playing for the individual. And they all shared that. And I remember in one interview after the game, Garnett was asked by one of the analysts, so, you had a great performance. And his first thing was really just deflecting it and saying, no, it wasn't me, it was the team. And that was something that they carried with them really, all the way to the championship that season. And I think, unless you have that values alignment, things can fall apart. Doesn't matter how good the players are on the roster.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's been pretty obvious with this Richmond team as well is they kind of spread the load. So there's no, like, they don't worry about stats, possessions, goals, that kind of stuff, right? Like, there's been games where no one stands out at all in terms of possessions, but they just win. And I think it's kind of that whole championship team versus a team of champions or whatever, right? So definitely. I think that's the kind of mentality. But having said that, they've got a player on the screen right now called Dustin Martin, who's pretty much like, you probably look at him as the most clutch player in kind of AFL history right now. The guy's been, it's kind of like Jordan, right? He's been in 3 grand finals, won 3 grand finals, but been, MVP pretty much, all 3 grand finals as well. So first one ever to win 3 grand final MVPs, which are called Norm Smith medals here in Australia.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some of those goals he scored, very much
saw him, right?
clutch goals, just basically throwing a Hail Mary pass effectively from like 60 meters out and just bounces 2 times and goes right between the posts and scores a goal. And for our American audience, perhaps look up Dustin Martin grand final goals on YouTube. You might not understand the game, but the purpose of it is to get the ball between the 2 highest sticks out of the 4 sticks. That's a better, easiest way to describe it.
But it's crazy, right? When you look, like, the guy's got like tats everywhere. He looks like a bikie, right? But apparently, like,
apparently he has got some connections to that world, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does. I think his dad was part of that world. But if you hear from people that talk about him, they're just like, he's like the nicest, sweetest guy. Like, the tats are just, the outside, but on the inside, he's like, he's an awesome guy. But also, he's really big on like journaling and meditation. And I think he started that probably, like, from what I read, like 2016, 17, around that time when he started to pick up his form as well. So I'm sure there's a bit of connection there in terms of that, meditation, journaling thing making a big impact on his performance as well.
Yeah, well, I bumped into him last year at it was a happy, what do they call it? Mad Monday.
Mad Monday, yeah.
Mad Monday, and I was there for a bit of a get together with Paul Roos, former AFL Premiership winning coach, and Martin was there, and it was the day after they'd won the Premiership, and he was pretty chill, and didn't seem hungover or whatnot. Came over, said a few words at the table, and took off. But it seemed pretty low key, for lack of a better word. But clearly not low key when it comes to the football pitch or his aesthetic appearance. But one other thing you touched on, which was meditation and journaling, and again, another basketball analogy is what Phil Jackson did with the Bulls that won 6 championships was, get them into meditation. Because Phil Jackson was a bit of a hippie growing up, and he was into, Osho and these different gurus, and he brought that to the basketball court. And effectively, like, when you do that, if you do it well, it kind of calms the mind and gets you to focus on the task at hand without letting, the monkey mind and all of these thoughts kind of distract you while you're trying to execute a play, for example.
Yeah, well, what the coach did, I think it was in 2016 at the end of the year, they had a pretty shit year. He went to the US and he met up with a couple of teams there, talked about what they were doing. So, man, like, all these sports, they kind of they're looking for the next thing, the edge, like, what are you doing differently? What can we do differently? And I think, that kind of, meditation, connection piece across players, all that stuff, he kind of brought some of that back, and it really filtered through the team. So everyone's it's all about that extra, 1-2%. Yeah. If you can get that extra 1-2%, that's what's going to differentiate the best teams from, the good or great teams.
Well, as they say in soccer, it's all about inches on the field.
That's it, right?
But just on that as well, I'm looking for those inches. There is a pretty cool documentary series on Netflix called The Coach's Playbook.
Oh yeah, I've added it to my list. Is it worth watching?
I've seen a couple of episodes. So there's that Doc Rivers one on the Boston Celtics, and the second episode that I saw was with Jose Mourinho, one of the world's leading football managers. And it's just interesting to note the disconnect between the two. One is very much selfless, and that's Doc Rivers, and he's all about the team. Whereas the other could not have a bigger ego if he tried. But it works for them. And that's the thing, right? Like you can go out there, you can look for these philosophies and techniques, but there's going to be different techniques that perhaps can contradict with each other that might work for different teams, different people, and really depends on, the temperament of the people on the bus and what you need to do to get the best out of them. And don't assume that because it worked for one team, it's going to work for another team.
Yeah, for sure. Even when you think about think of Phil Jackson, right? He did it at Chicago. He did it with the Lakers, but he obviously had a great team, right? And then he went into like the back office at the Knicks, New York Knicks, and he just created, it was a shambles. The guy sucked and he just got fired or he quit. I can't remember what happened, but just shows you might be really good at it, and it might not always be the case later on. So if he started coaching, say if he was coaching the Lakers now, doesn't necessarily mean they're going to win, right? It's all about, personnel, timing, all those kind of things coming into it as well. So, and I guess with Phil Jackson as well, it's one of those things where his mentality and the way he coached, 15, 20 years ago, I think it was that long, would it still be relevant now and be able to perform during this current, way the NBA is played? Who knows? But be an interesting experiment if he did come back.
Yeah, well, I guess he might, just like our mate Brian Goorjian, having come back from China after a 10-year absence to coach in the National Basketball League here in Australia again. And I think he's in his early to mid 60s, which is probably about the same age as Phil Jackson nowadays.
Yeah.
So we hold up hope.
We'll see what happens with him. I think hopefully the NBL season starts eventually sometime.
hopefully. But obviously a big grand final weekend here in Australia, not just the Australian Football League, but also the National Rugby League. Its season came to a close on Sunday evening over in Sydney at the Homebush Stadium before a capped audience of 40,000. That's an 80,000 seat stadium, so basically 50% cap. But our local boys, the Melbourne Storm, they lifted their 6th premiership trophy in their 10th grand final appearance. Did you catch the game on Sunday evening?
I saw bits and pieces, but it's a funny story. I was actually driving past the stadium when the game finished. And like I heard this massive bang, and I was yes. I nearly crashed, and there was like massive fireworks literally just above the car.
You mean Amy Park?
Amy Park, yeah, Amy Park. Yeah, I was driving past. It was quite funny, but Storm dominated, right, from the sounds of things.
Well, interestingly enough, I mean, the first half they dominated on the scoreboard, so they wrapped up. They went into halftime 22-0, so they were just smashing Penrith. But on the pitch, in terms of possession, Penrith had more possession, but anytime they got close to a try, either it was disallowed or they just made some rookie mistake, whereas the Storm didn't have as many chances but converted all of them. So Lady Luck was definitely smiling upon the Melbourne Storm. And so they went into the half 22-0, but then only won by 6 points, 26-20, thanks to a late charge from Penrith. So it was actually a bit of a nail biter in the last few minutes for all of the Melbourneites watching the game. But it was great to see. I think, again, a bit like Richmond, I mean, Craig Bellamy has been the coach at the Storm for, I think he's been there for
from the start,
20 years or something.
Far out.
And to be a team from Melbourne, which isn't a rugby league city at all, but to make it to the grand final 10 of the last 20 years, to win 6 of those times, have 2 of those premierships taken away because of supposed salary cap breaches, even though those players were developed by them, which I thought was a bit of a sham. And to lose players like Billy Slater last year, Cooper Cronk the year before, and to just come back and keep dominating. Like I'd love to get Craig Bellamy on the podcast, on the Future Squared podcast sometime, just to pick his brain and find out what makes him tick. And I'm sure he'll write a memoir or something at some point. But he's another one of these coaches that has just defied all the odds, and no doubt some lessons to be learned from someone like him.
It's funny. I didn't watch all the game, but I saw one of the post game interviews with one of the Melbourne Storm players. I think his name was is it Brandon Smith? He's like this
Cameron
like Larry.
Smith.
Not Cameron Smith.
The other Smith.
He's like a larrikin kind of guy, and like it was funny. Like usually you hear these interviews with players, and they're really clean cut. They say all the right things. He just didn't care after the game. He was just like, I played really shit today. Luckily, everyone else played really well. And then he started saying some stuff like, he was talking about Cameron Smith.
Yep.
And he's like, yeah, Cameron Smith, like I hope he plays next year. He literally is our coach out there. He tells us what to do, whatever. And then in regards to Bellamy, he's just like, Bellamy doesn't do anything. Like he just sits there and gets paid, whereas Cameron Smith's really our coach. It was just like super funny the way this guy was talking about it. But it's probably true. Like, you know, you need your on-field leaders as well. And I'm sure Cameron Smith's been there for such a long time, right? And if he ends up leaving, it's probably going to leave a massive hole for these guys. Yeah. There we go. That's the guy. If you Google the interview, post-game interview, Brandon Smith is quite humorous.
Well, let's see if we can bring
I'm
this
sure you
up.
can find it.
Brandon Smith.
It'll be there somewhere.
Well, it's like, I guess Cameron Smith is kind of like the, his role is basically like the point guard in basketball. He's the coach.
Or like a quarter. Oh, yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, for sure. Oh, there you go. That's the one.
Well, here we go. Brandon Smith post-game interview, bringing this up in 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1.
Hopefully there's no ads. Go straight into it. No, we got an ad for you.
Well, we need to sit through the ad in 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here we go.
Jeez. Yeah. How was that? How did that feel?
Yeah, no, it's pretty good. I mean, I played pretty shit tonight, but I got the ring and yeah, it's for sale. I need to pay for all the beers I'm about to sink.
Give us a look at the bling.
Yeah, it's not bad. I can't wait to take this back home to my mum and dad. You know, everything they sacrificed to put me in this position that I'm in right now, and this is definitely for them. So I'm super stoked, and I just can't wait to get on the piss with all the boys. And
who's your drinking partner?
I'll take anyone as long as they'll drink a lot.
Can we not give Josh out a card too much? Can we hold him back?
Yeah, I think so. I think we'll get Christian Roche too drunk to play Origin. So yeah,
Munster, we can get Munster on the drink.
Yeah. He'll probably do something stupid. So yeah, I'll get him on the beers for you. Let's go.
What about your coach and captain? What do you got to say about them?
Mate, to the captain, I hope he can play on. I know it's a tough situation for me, but I wouldn't want him carrying me to another couple of rings. So I don't think we should force him out of the game. I think he decides whatever he wants to do. And Craig, he does nothing pretty much all year, and Smitty does all the coaching. So yeah, he's just getting paid lots of money to do pistol.
Coming straight from the cheese. There you go.
I couldn't hear that, but I'm assuming you were able to hear it on your end.
Our listeners will be able to hear that. That was pretty hilarious. I mean, he's all about getting pissed and taking the piss out of his coach.
Yeah, that's it. But I guess, like you said, given Bellamy's record, like, you know, the players can take the piss out of him, but everyone knows the fact, you know, obviously he's a pretty epic coach if he's been there for such a long time and had so much success as well.
Definitely. Well, a very big weekend in sports, which is funny to say because a few months ago, everybody was wondering, what's happening with sports? There's nothing to watch on TV. How are we going to keep ourselves distracted? How are we going to quell all this anxiety we're feeling without sport? But fortunately, sport has come back. And not only was the AFL and NRL Grand Finals on over the weekend, we had UFC 245 with Khabib Nurmagomedov, perhaps the greatest of all time pound for pound fighter. He beat Justin Gaethje with a second round submission and basically went on to announce his retirement from the sport with a record of 29-0. I don't know how much you know about Khabib, Shay, but he is basically perhaps the most formidable fighter that has ever lived. I mean, this guy grew up in Dagestan, a part of Russia, where as a child, he basically wrestled cubs, small bears. So perhaps it's unsurprising to see him go on to dominate the UFC.
Jeez, do you reckon? How old is he? You know, when these guys they retire, they like come back in a year and they're like
in his early 30s. The thing is, he's 32, man. So he's 5 years younger than me, which makes me feel bad about my life's achievements. But essentially, he's a very family-oriented guy, and his dad had been at pretty much every single one of his fights until recently. He passed away in July. Yeah. And Khabib's mum basically didn't want him to fight again. Khabib said he talked to his mother and promised that this would be his last fight. So he basically won the fight and, announced his retirement directly after.
But he hates Conor McGregor, yeah? These guys have a bit of a rivalry.
They did have a big tiff and a big falling out. I mean, their camps were rivaling. A lot of words were exchanged. There was that incident where Connor's crew threw a brick at the bus window that Khabib's crew were in. And then when they finally fought, Khabib obviously won that fight. Well, maybe not so obviously for the non-UFC fans listening to this, but right after the fight, he submitted Connor and then jumped out into the audience. He literally dived into the audience from the octagon and started swinging at Connor's entourage and his posse. So that was a very memorable video. We've got that on the NoFilter website if people want to reminisce.
I wouldn't be surprised if he says retired. Say in 2 years' time there'll be like this massive fight with McGregor that they'll start promoting and make millions and millions of dollars out of it.
Maybe.
I'm sure something will come around. It always happens, right? It's all a show, right? But unless he's super serious and he's like, you know what, this is it, I'm not going to go back. But you can never say never with these kind of sports, especially UFC, right?
Oh, definitely. And I mean, on Conor, Khabib basically said, McGregor and Poirier fight in January. I checked out both of them. I'm not interested in this. So basically saying he's not interested in Conor. Very dismissing. But surprisingly, Conor McGregor responded on Twitter and kind of, I suppose, threw water on the fire around him being this antagonist. He basically said, "Good performance, Khabib. I will carry on. Respect and condolences on your father again. Also to you and your family. Yours sincerely, the McGregors." So I think that was a classy move on Conor's part, and perhaps a great way to signal the end of Khabib's career, at least for now.
Nice one. Are there fans of the UFC now, or are they still empty?
I believe they're empty. So they're fighting at Fights Island in Abu Dhabi, where they have social distancing in place. I believe there is a very small contingent in the audience. I believe, crew and whatnot.
It's pretty cool though. It's pretty cool. Like Fight Island. It's just like, I'm sure they could make a movie out of it as well.
I'm sure they could, but yeah, this is basically the venue you can see here on the screen. So there's literally there's no seats or anything to that effect. They make most of their money through the pay-per-views anyways. So it's nice to have, 20,000 people in a stadium, each paying $100 or $200 for a ticket. But when you've got millions around the world paying $50 for the pay-per-view, that's where you make your money.
Yeah.
So perhaps we'll move on from sport and get into entertainment. So it finally happened. Kanye West made his long-awaited appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience. Yes.
How was it? Tell us about it, Steve. Have you heard it? Obviously,
I heard it. I listened to it on Sunday morning. The morning it was released. Look, I guess it was nothing that anybody who has any inkling as to what kind of person Kanye is would be surprised by. It was more or less a monologue where Kanye's stream of consciousness was just projected or broadcast onto the Joe Rogan Experience. I mean, Joe got a few questions in, but it was literally Kanye talking for 3 hours. A whole bunch of disconnected thoughts that to me sounded great in theory, but perhaps wouldn't really stand up in practice.
Was there anything controversial? Like, if there was one thing you'd be like, this is what he did or what he said, what would it be?
I mean, I published an article on the NoFilter website with some of the key quotes, if you will. I mean, one thing he said was, "I believe my calling is to be the leader of the free world." So that's one thing. Let's say, "I don't fear anything but God. I'm building a monastery that will be the future of monasteries, like full sustainable energy. God is using me and has a calling in my life to make the world better for all people." Here's something that he said about the way he thinks. "I think very three-dimensionally. I don't think in the black and white lines I've been programmed to think in, and I think in full color. So when I talk, I have to describe a thought in 5 ways." And look, it was entertaining. I will say that.
But it's clear. But like you said, you kind of probably no surprises in terms of how he went about himself, like the interview. But I guess there's no learnings you can take away and apply to your life. Let's just put it that way.
I would say there was one learning I took away from it, and it's not really. It probably just reinforced something that I had already thought about and wrote about previously, but it was, and I've got it here. Yeah, I'm going to listen to kids before I listen to super programmed out adults, and especially if that adult hasn't done something that I am looking to do. So I thought that was an epic one-liner, because oftentimes it's easy to just seek out the advice of other adults, but more often than not, they're programmed out. They've given up on their dream job. They've given up on their dream partner. They're just like settling and going through the motions. And, you know, human beings are built to rationalize our decisions because it makes us feel comfortable with where we're at and we can move forward. But if you take advice from people like that, you're just going to rationalize and make suboptimal decisions. So if you are taking advice from someone, as Kanye has suggested here, has that person done what you want to do? Are they living the way you want to live? If not, then maybe, you know, think twice.
Yeah, it reminds me of being trapped in the corporate world, where I think a lot of the time I got to a point where I'm like working for people and I'm like, do I want to become like this person? Like, do I aspire to be something similar to this person? And eventually I got to the point where many times I would say, you know, probably not. Like, this is probably not who I want to be. I don't want to be in that person's position. And it kind of, makes you realize that, you know, maybe there are different paths to take.
Yeah, definitely. I think you wrote an article about that as well, which people can find on the Collective Campus blog at collectivecampus.io/blog. But yeah, it was, I mean, for someone who wants to be the leader of the free world, I think he just needs to get better at actually listening and having a conversation rather than just speaking at people, because you're not going to get very far doing that sort of stuff. You know, genius musician, obviously prolifically creative, but I don't quite see that translating into diplomatic competence, if you will.
Is he still he's kind of withdrawn from becoming president or whatever, right? He's not really looking at that stuff anymore.
Well, he's still running.
He's still running?
He's on the ballot in something like 12 areas.
Oh wow,
he's on 12 ballots. Yeah. So he's still running. You know, I don't. He's obviously not going to win. You know, I don't think even if he won all 12 ballots that he would get enough votes to be the president this time around. Maybe in 2024, who knows? I mean, America, you know, from the outside looking in, when it comes to its political race, it seems to be a pretty crazy place at the moment. I mean, if Trump can be president, then
exactly right.
anyone can be president, right? I mean, there was a lot of talk about The Rock running with Jocko Willink being his vice president, and that actually got a lot of support, not just from, you know, people who listen to these personalities, but a lot of respected academics, intellectuals, and whatnot were on board with The Rock being president. So,
that's crazy.
You know, I'm sure he can't do a worse job than some of the past presidents. So,
no, well, that's exactly it, right? I think the problem with Trump is he's like lowered the bar a lot. So, you know, all these other figures coming in, they'd probably have a decent shot if Trump got in. You know, who knows with everyone else, right?
Definitely. So, I mean, we're on the topic of Trump. We may as well double click on some politics. So, 50 Cent basically declared his support for Donald Trump again a few days ago in an Instagram post. So the Instagram post basically read, "What the fuck? Vote for Trump. I'm out. Fuck New York. The Knicks never win anyway. I don't care if Trump doesn't like black people. 62%, are you out of your fucking mind?" So he posted this in reference to Joe Biden's proposed tax plans that would impose a 62% tax on New Yorkers making more than $400,000 a year. 62%. How would that make you feel if you were living in Manhattan right now?
That's a shitload of money, right? that's
more than
a big ass percentage.
Yeah, I thought Australia was the most overtaxed place in the world.
Oh man,
you know, 48.5% at the highest tax bracket, but 62% is almost 2/3 of your take-home pay of your pay.
That is nuts. There was something on Twitter around a photo. I think it was 50 Cent and Ice-T or Ice Cube. I think it might have been Ice Cube, right? And there was like people, they were wearing hats, and people or someone did some Photoshop and put like Trump on their hats or whatever, right? It was probably linked to this post as well, so I'm sure there's some linkage there. But yeah, man, it's pretty crazy. Like, it makes me think about, with 50 Cent, it's funny, right? The guy is loaded. The guy, well, I'm pretty sure he actually filed for bankruptcy a little while ago, but he made all his money through vitamin water. Do you remember? Do you remember vitamin water?
Yeah, yeah.
I think like it's sold in mid to late, like maybe 2010 or something, or around that time. It's sold for like billions of dollars. And yeah, 50 Cent had a big stake in that business. I haven't seen it since. I don't know what's going on with vitamin water, but all I know is it was pretty full of sugar.
Yeah,
That's
well,
all
you
it was,
probably exited at some point. I mean, those companies, when you get to that scale, they're actually worth quite a bit of money. I mean, who was it? Quest Nutrition, Tom Bilyeu and those guys, they recently exited for $1 billion. So protein bars can make you a lot of money. Also, this Thursday, I'm speaking with David Pryor, who sold 5 a.m. yogurt. You've probably seen them.
Yeah, I've seen it.
In Coles and Woolies. So they basically, he founded that in something like 2010, sold it 4 years later for $80 million, and then proceeded to sink 40 million of that into a whiskey distillery in Scotland and resurrect that. But yeah, lots of money to be made in these small, fast-moving consumer goods companies. If you get it right, obviously for every success, there's probably a thousand failures when it comes to selling, food products and things of that persuasion.
Well, that's it. I'm just looking at the vitamin water stuff. It looks like apparently Coca-Cola acquired vitamin water for $4 billion in 2007, right? And I think 50 Cent had a minor stake in the business, but
even
I'm
5%
sure
of $4 billion is.
Well, that's the thing. Like he would have made some decent money from his rapping career, but nowhere near as much as he would have made from that. It just shows you the power and importance of I think our Naval says it best when he talks about if you want to be rich and get very wealthy, you need to have a stake in a business or have some equity somewhere, because otherwise you're not going to reach those heights that I guess, like if you look at 50 Cent, he made a lot of that money through vitamin water because he had a stake in that business, not so much
100%
the rapping.
Well, I mean, a simple example would be, even if you're making, say, $100,000, which in most countries is a decent amount of money, something to aspire to. But you've got 2 kids, you got to put them through school, you've got to put food on the table, you've got to pay your rent, your insurance, all this sort of stuff. I mean, you'd be lucky to save $15,000 a year.
Yeah.
Now, times that by 20 years, that's $300,000. Let's add, say, 50% for inflation over that time, $450,000 over 20 years. Not a lot of money to be in the bank. And let's face it, 20 years from now, buying a house is probably going to set you back millions of dollars.
It's true.
But if you build a business that makes a few $100,000 a year, say profit, you could sell that business for $1.5 million. And doing so is not as difficult as it sounds. Whereas the alternative, you've got your comfortable salary coming in, it's secure, all that sort of stuff. But in terms of creating that wealth, that real wealth, like having a stake in a business is, orders of magnitude more likely to get you there than just collecting a salary.
That's exactly it. So, well, 50 Cent did that pretty well. And definitely, I think, like you said, with that 100K salary, you can live a comfortable life, a happy life, but you're not going to get to those wealth standards or, the aspirations a lot of people have to, be rich or have a lot of money where they can just do what they want, right? And have that freedom. And I think you're not going to get that freedom unless you have that equity.
Yeah. And people listening to this might think, oh, but I haven't got the kind of money to pour into businesses. And nowadays you can invest as little as, say, $500 through these equity crowd raising platforms like Equitize in Australia, for example, where you can build a portfolio of investments in early stage startups. You might invest $10,000 across 20 startups. And, if you've diversified enough, if one of those startups goes bang, well, you could be looking at, say, a 50 to 100x return on that money. So if you put $10,000 into one of those startups, well, then times that by, say, 50 if they're successful, and you're looking at quite a decent return for what is a relatively small investment.
Exactly, that's it. So it's a good takeaway, good learning. Thanks, 50 Cent. He's a good teacher.
Definitely. And just before we move on from 50 Cent, it's funny to see that he said, "I don't want to be 20 cents," in reference to the tax bill. And his ex-girlfriend, Chelsea Handler, she appeared on the Late Night with Jimmy Fallon, and basically said, "I had to remind 50 Cent that he was a black person, so he can't vote for Donald Trump." So I didn't realize that your skin color could change based on who you voted for, but there you go. This is a little bit like Peter Thiel being accused of no longer being gay because he openly supports Donald Trump. So it's I guess it's just a tribalism gone crazy where you need to vote for a certain way just based on what you look like or who you choose to go to bed with.
When's the election's in like a week, isn't it?
Yeah, I believe it's 9th of November. So
9th, is it? Okay.
On a Sunday.
All right, so still a little bit left, but
yeah,
man, we'll see what happens.
All the debates are wrapped up, so will be interesting to see how that plays out over the next couple of days. On this topic of 50 Cent, I was about to say Kanye West, 50 Cent being white because he chose to vote for Trump, or he chooses to support Trump, he might have to consider enrolling in the University of Minnesota's 12-step Whiteness Recovery program. So this is a program that the University of Minnesota launched a couple of weeks ago, basically like an AA-styled program to help white people recover and reclaim their full humanity. Now, I don't know, man, like this sort of stuff, as you know, I'm not really a big fan of it, but it kind of moves away from what Martin Luther King Jr. used to talk about. Judge someone based on the content of their character, not the color of their skin. Whereas what a lot of these programs and ideas suggest is that if you are white, then you are by extension of that immediately, irrefutably a racist, and that's it. Like, to me, that's just absolutely crazy.
Jeez, this is like, so what are these 12 steps? Like, does it have any more information?
We've got the 12 steps for you, mate. 12 steps. So I'm not going to go through all the steps, but I'll
give us a couple of highlights. Yeah, give us the highlights.
All right. So number one, we admitted that we had been socially conditioned by the ideology of white supremacy, that our minds were subject to racial biases, often unconsciously so. So this is as you're recovering, right? So number two, we came to believe that we could embrace our ignorance as an invitation to learn. Number three, we developed support systems to keep us engaged in this work. Now, jumping ahead to number 12, we committed ourselves to sharing this message with our white brothers, sisters, and siblings in order to build a supportive recovery community and to encourage personal accountability within our culture.
There you go.
It's just quite exhausting to my mind. Ultimately, look, everybody wants the world to be a better place. We want to provide people of all color, of all creed with equal opportunity. But I think when you go out there and you start accusing people of being racist and whatnot, despite how they might live their lives, despite how they might think, just saying that, well, you're subject to these things, even if you don't think it, even if you don't feel it, you are. That's just going to sow more division in a time when I think we need to be coming together more than ever before. Yeah,
exactly right. It's kind of it's probably going to be a lot more of this stuff as we go along as well. It's probably the start of many more courses. So it's a course people can attend? Like, do they just kind of sign up for it? I just find this stuff so fascinating.
Yeah, it's basically it's a webinar. Online? It's a webinar series. Yeah, so you can sign up to it online. So Shay, I know I don't even know if I'd consider you white. I mean, you're a Persian, so you're a person of color. I would have been a person of color a few decades ago, being a wug, as they say here in Australia, but. Even in the United States, there was a time when Italians were considered people of color and were, they were basically racially persecuted. But of course, now they have been assimilated into what it means to be a white American. And so the definition has shifted to, people who are of perhaps more than just olive skin.
Yeah.
But look, that's that. If people want to see the full 12-step program, if they have some form of white guilt, get on the website, sign up to that program. We won't hold it against you. We'll just block you from listening to the podcast. Moving on. Earlier this year, we talked about Quibi, Jeffrey Katzenberg's streaming service. Guess what, mate? They have shut down.
They used all of 50 cents vitamin water money, right? Probably similar. How much did they go through?
Pretty much almost half of 50 cents vitamin water. $1.3 billion in under 7 months for a platform that got very little to no traction. The sad thing about all of this, though, is that Jeffrey Katzenberg and Meg Whitman, she was the former CEO at eBay, they co-founded the company and they shared their sentiments on the demise of the company in a Medium blog post. where they basically said that, and yet Quibi is not succeeding, likely for one of two reasons: because the idea itself wasn't strong enough, or because of our timing. So despite all of this, they're still kind of refusing to take full ownership for its failure.
So for people listening, so Quibi's, as far as I remember, it's just like a streaming platform, but it's mobile focused. So it's all mobile based, but it's also short videos and episodes of things to watch, right? That's kind of the purpose behind it.
Yeah, short form
okay.
streaming content.
Short
So
form.
I think everything is less than 10 minutes.
Okay.
So, they say that it could be timing. Jeffrey Katzenberg at the time was saying, well, with everyone working from home and living at home and whatnot, this is just going to go through the roof. But it had the opposite effect. And he's basically saying, it's because of coronavirus. But as we've discussed previously, Disney Plus got to 60 million subscribers during COVID. Netflix doubled its subscriber base during COVID. They've succeeded. Quibi didn't because substandard content. Like you said, mobile only. You couldn't stream it to your computer or your TV.
Yeah, which cuts out like as in, I personally don't really watch like any of these streaming services on my phone. Like I'm watching it on TV, right? I don't want to sit there on my little phone watching it. I guess a big part of it would have been maybe the people commuting to work potentially watching stuff, but obviously probably less commuting now given everything going on, remote working and all that. So there's obviously a few elements, but to go through that much money as well, that's ludicrous.
Oh, it's absolutely ludicrous. I just, when I think about how lean our company is and what we could do with something like $1.3 billion, which is effectively the GDP of the Solomon Islands, mind you, 1.3 billion.
So what happens to Quibi now? Do they just, when they say, we're shutting down or whatever, does it just like stop like at the end of this week and no one, like everyone gets their, subscription money back? How does it work? Like
I haven't looked into the specifics of that.
I'm just curious, like how they would handle it, right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if they've spent all 1.3 billion, if they've spent maybe half of it to get to this point and they're going to give whatever money they haven't spent back to their investors. Maybe they have to pay out their investors like 5 cents in the dollar or something like that. I don't know what those terms are.
The timing thing reminds me of the Segway. Like the Segway came out, everyone's like, this is so cool, but no one knew how to, like, there was no real application for it. And it was kind of just like, people were like, oh, it's too advanced for the time it came out and things like that. And now it's like, I randomly saw this guy in a Segway, I think about a year ago, just like in a suit, riding to work on a Segway. And I've never seen anything like that in my life. That was probably one of the few times I've seen someone in normal life use a Segway. Like right now, the only time I see Segways would be if you're on holiday and people are doing tours around some, capital city or something, riding around on a Segway with a tour guide. But it just kind of reminds me of that, where it's a piece of technology that came out, people were excited by it, but there was no application for it. And it's kind of just like dwindled along and people have found it's pretty much just like a tourism thing now.
Yeah, it's pretty much tourism and like mall cops in the United States.
Mall cops, that's it.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I think part of it might have been just that it wasn't so portable to carry with you, whereas you've seen things like these electronic scooters take off, and perhaps because you can fold them up and you can carry them around.
And they're cheaper as well, I'm sure, right? Segway's probably not cheap at all, right?
I'm not sure. I'm not one for electric scooters or Segways, so I haven't looked into it, but I imagine the scooters would be like a few hundred, maybe $1,000 or something like that.
Yeah. I know the electric scooters are about 1,000, but the Segways are about 6,000 to 8,000.
Wow, that's a lot of money to
USD,
pay for
right?
something that isn't all that great. I mean, you could get one of those one wheels for about $1,000 as well, and they're similar to a Segway, except a lot more portable as well.
Yeah. It's I think a Segway is one of those things where, like you said, unless you're in tourism or you're a mall cop, the only time you would buy a Segway if you were too rich, it's something probably that 50 Cent would buy just to ride around his house.
Yeah, around his mansion, because it would take him his vitamin water
like a
mansion. And just to wrap up on the Quibi stuff, it was funny that one of their parting quotes was, although the circumstances were not right for Quibi to succeed as a standalone company, our team achieved much of what we set out to accomplish, which I'm sure that much really includes growing the subscriber base, building a sustainable business, and generating a return on investment, none of which they actually did. So great case study in not taking ownership as a leader there.
Nice, man. There's too many streaming services. They just gotta like just cut it out. Like I think we've got plenty already. We don't need any more.
Yeah. How many? I mean, I know you've subscribed to
I'm
Netflix and
I'm
Disney.
actually I've got four. Like one of them I get for free. So I've got Netflix, Disney, Prime, like Amazon Prime, and then Binge is like the new Australian one, which I think is linked to Foxtel, and Telstra. I get that for free, but I don't really use it much. But my favorite one is Prime, and the reason for that is I used to hate Prime, but they've upped their user interface a lot, but it's so much cheaper than all the other ones, and it links to obviously free delivery from Amazon and a few other benefits as well. So it's cheaper, and you get a lot more benefit than you do, say, from a Netflix or a Disney Plus. So I'm all on the Amazon bandwagon.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, we've got a few minutes left, so I'm going to dive into not necessarily the archives, but we're going to go back 8 days, back to Twitter and Facebook, blocking the sharing of an article that the New York Post published last week. So the article basically incriminated Joe Biden and Hunter Biden for some of their dealings with the Ukrainian energy company. And it turned out that people could not post this on Twitter. They basically said this tweet is no longer available, or a technical issue ensued. And the same thing happened on Facebook. Now, both Facebook and Twitter were obviously criticized by people who don't support Trump and Joe Biden, for saying that this goes out of your wheelhouse. Like, you're a tech platform, you should just let people post content. It's not in your, it's not your responsibility to determine what people see, what people don't see. And once you start doing that, as we've discussed previously, it's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
And, this morning I actually had Gad Saad on the Future Squared podcast. That episode goes live tomorrow. He wrote the book, The Parasitic Mind. And one thing he said, like, he's a Lebanese Jew. So he left Lebanon due to religious persecution 4 decades ago as a young child. And when I talked to him about the slippery slope thing that we've discussed, he says, look, I'm a Lebanese Jew. I've been religiously persecuted, but I support the right of Holocaust deniers to spread their BS online. Because he says that once you say one thing, well, that's, let's just ban that because that's just blatantly untrue, then you open up the door to banning all sorts of things. And then who gets to ban? Like 30-year-olds who are great at on-page conversions? I don't think so. But what he basically said was, look, ideas should exist in a free marketplace of exchange. And the best ideas, the most true ideas should rise to the top. Right. Ideas like the Holocaust denial, which is absolutely BS, will basically get beaten to submission as Khabib would do to Conor McGregor in the octagon. So but it's just another kind of scary sort of development whereby these tech companies are kind of playing God and deciding what ideas get to go into people's minds and what ideas don't.
Well, and when these kind of articles are written where it's like they're blocking this information or this article or this idea, people get intrigued by it as well. They're like, oh, what's this? And they'll do a bit of research and they'll find out about it as well, like somewhere else. It's kind of like that. It's the concept of
it's a backfire.
I kind of link it to. I hear, like, obviously I got a 2-year-old, and like one of the things I'm kind of thinking about it is like as she gets older, like how much time does she spend, using an iPad or a phone or whatever, right? And I think from what you hear, when you ban something completely from someone, they're just like, they want it more. It's like a drug, right? But if you give them a little bit of it here and there, they're less likely to just want it really badly. So I guess with something like this, when you hear stories are being banned, personally, I've got the mindset where I'm like, I want to find out more about this. Like, let's read some more of. And there's always going to be platforms that obviously, share this stuff. You might not have it on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, but you might go on Reddit and there'll be heaps of stuff on Reddit about it or wherever, right? So, it might have an opposite impact potentially as well.
Yeah. I think it actually did backfire, and like this article got a lot more heat than it would have otherwise by virtue of this saga. But it's funny what you say there as well about the backfire effect. It's kind of like in the 80s when the Parents Music Resource Center, led by, I think it was Tipper Gore, went to Congress to get those explicit lyrics stickers onto CDs and albums. And as a result of that, any album that had that explicit lyrics content, blah, blah, sticker on the front cover became like 10 times more cool and popular amongst teenagers.
I was just going to say, it was like super cool to get that sticker. I remember all the hardcore rap albums back in the day, they all had it. And you're just like, I got to listen to this.
Yeah, like I remember even movies. I remember watching White Man Can't Jump or getting it from the video store when I was like 9 years old. And it had something like explicit lyrics on the cover. It was MA. And I went there I think it was with my mum. And she was none the wiser. And then the staff were like, are you sure you want to let your son watch this? And I was like, yeah, man, it's fine. Speaking on her behalf. And I wanted it because MA, man, I was cool. I felt like I was breaking some rules. And it turned out to be a classic film as well. So
yeah. You picked a good one there. But no, it's true, right? It was cool back in the day, all those stickers. And now everything's just streamed. Like there's no one cares about that stuff anymore. Like you can watch whatever you want when you want, listen to whatever you want when you want. And it was cool. Like it did make it cool back in the day. And especially like you said, when you're 10, 11 years old, that's the kind of stuff you want to do. Even with video games as well, right? Mm-hmm. Video games, you want to, the scary ones, the ones you're shooting people, like they're just not the
like
you
Doom
want to do, but you want to like play those games because they're the cool ones. They're what all the older kids are playing, right? So it's what do you bring it up now? We've got
so we're going to wrap up with a bit of on a positive note. Obviously, we've been in lockdown here in Melbourne for like 7 months or something crazy. So that now is coming to an end to some degree tomorrow. I mean, there are still certain restrictions in place which may prevent us from returning to normal, but we will still be able to go to retail places. We'll be able to go to restaurants. We'll be able to travel within the state of Victoria, see friends, see family, which for many of us will be a very welcome relief. So perhaps to close up, what's the first thing you're going to do that perhaps you could not do, Shay, for the last 7 months?
Well, the first, so they eased some of the restrictions, I think last Tuesday, and one of them was the haircut one. You could go to barbers.
Yeah.
So I literally yesterday evening, I went to the barber and it was like the best feeling ever, just getting my haircut. Like I can't remember the last time I actually got my haircut, but it was a pretty good feeling. So that was the first thing I did when those.
Did you have to wait?
No, I was lucky. Like I went at a time where it wasn't fully packed, and like there was one other person in front of me, so it wasn't too bad. And it was just a nice feeling, just sitting in a chair and just getting your haircut, it sounds like a really simple thing, but it was really nice actually, just getting my haircut and just feeling a bit more fresh than what I did before. Mm-hmm. But I think with these new restrictions getting eased, I think the first thing I'll do is probably go to my parents' place or have them come over to my actual house, or us go to their house, and probably drop my daughter off there as well and let her hang out with them. They were able to come the other week, but they weren't actually, like, legally they're not allowed to actually come in the house. So they came over and they went to a park with my 2-year-old, and they were just so happy to see her, and vice versa. So I think that's probably the main thing for me.
Fantastic, man.
Yeah. Well, what about yourself, Steve? You gonna hit the clubs?
I don't think I'll be hitting any of the clubs, maybe the surf lifesaving clubs. So I'll be going surfing down the coast as of, well, that's one of the delayed restrictions. So that 25-kilometer limit gets lifted on the 9th of November. So in a couple of weeks' time, I'll be going surfing. But in the interim, definitely just heading out to a restaurant with some friends to share a meal and have a drink, I think will be definitely high on the agenda.
It's crazy because there were some comparisons done where obviously our cases were spiking in Melbourne, and I think cases were spiking. I think it was France or a couple of other places, and obviously we had the hardcore restrictions, and now we're down to 0. And those other places, they didn't do it, and they're just out of control in terms of their cases now. So kind of, I don't know, like it sounds like potentially we did the best thing for the time, and like, short-term pain, long-term gain. But we'll just see how things kind of evolve over the next couple of months, and if cases are still under control. Yeah,
well, it's hard to say that whether or not we did the best thing, because we're not looking at the full suite of variables. So if you're basing it on purely case numbers then maybe. Right now, in this point of time, it looks great.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about economic damage. We're not talking about mental health, relationships, and all those other downstream effects. So those places that did open up, perhaps those variables are in their favor a lot more than they are in ours. So when we cherry pick one variable, it's easy to and that's something that Dan Andrews was trying to do yesterday. I think as he was,
What did he?
well, at his press conference, he's obviously trying to muster political support as every politician does. And he's like, look, see, if we didn't do this, we'd be in a much worse position. So this is a byproduct of us doing what we had to, making the tough choices. And now we're down to zero.
Yeah.
And the thing he neglects to talk about is all that other stuff and everything that people have gone through mentally, financially, people losing jobs, companies shutting down, all that, crap effectively. So, and I guess it's probably too early to tell whether or not we have done the right thing in terms of the cases, because who knows, we'll open up and maybe in a few weeks' time we'll just be spiking again and we'll just be on this merry-go-round where we kind of just need to get on with it and deal with the consequences as best we can. Who knows?
Well, we'll definitely, apparently we'll still have to keep wearing masks, I think, until early next year at least. So that's one thing that'll stay. But as long as we can go do these normal things again, I'll wear a mask wherever they want me to do. I don't care.
It's a small price to pay for freedom.
That's it.
And speaking of freedom and masks, check out Borat 2 because they do go down that rabbit hole. And I'll end this one on that. Check out Borat 2. Thank God that lockdown is over, or thank whoever you believe in, even if it is yourself, even if it is Kanye West and he is the leader of the free world. Thank Kanye for the end of Victoria's lockdown. Shay, have a great rest of your week. Enjoy that time with the family, and I'll see you
Will do.
next week or the week after.
See you, mate.